yeah, the WRX is officially ready. Good morning, boys and girls. So it is another day working on this thing. So remember, whenever you start a project, always budget for 3 times more time than it's supposed to take, because that's how long it always takes. Always. Doesn't even matter when you get good at it. Multiply it by 2, multiply it by 3. But long story short is the only thing left to do on this little guy. Hold on, I'm going to turn on my little light here. Only thing left to do is, I guess you can't really see from up top, but basically we just have to unbolt the exhaust manifold, because we were running into the issue where the exhaust manifold was actually, it just made it really awkward to get to the bolts that we needed to get. But literally the only thing we have to do is unbolt the exhaust manifold, unbolt the motor mount bolts, and then basically start lifting this bad boy up. And once we lift it up enough to where it doesn't have weights on the actual brackets that mount onto the side of the block, then we can unbolt the brackets from the side of the block, drop those off through the bottom, and then we'll be able to actually lift the motor up, hopefully without too much interference. It'll be a little funky. Like I said, if you're doing, especially if you're doing this by yourself, I would really recommend take off the front bumper, because you can see we lost like this much distance almost, essentially, that we could have moved this all forward. And you can see we're actually doing something I heavily don't recommend doing. What we're going to probably end up... So, long story short is that, like, just for the sake of time, last time we just stuck this in here to see how far out we could get it to go. Hi, cat! So what we're going to do is we're going to modify this, because... again, first and foremost, if you don't know what you're doing, then don't emulate this. You need to actually, run the numbers through your head, run the logic through your head. Like, you'll notice we obviously, the bar is still, like, up to, like, here-ish in the chassis. So it's measured by, if this hole is here, you can hold up to a ton, so 2,000 pounds. If it's up to here, you can do a 3/4 of a ton. And this is all based upon what this hydraulic ram can take, not necessarily what the strength of this is. So then, 1/2 ton, 1/4 ton, and we essentially invented the 1/8 ton. So basically, with the 1/8 ton, 1/8 ton, if you do your math, so 1/4 of a ton is 200 pounds, or
1/4 of a ton is 500.
500 pounds, thank you.
250.
1/8 of a ton is 250. This motor weighs like 150. So that's what our logic here is. And I am going to, like, just to start doing stuff, we're just gonna, to make sure we can actually lift everything up properly, we're gonna leave this as this, because it's not gonna slide forward under these circumstances. But after that, I do have a drill bit that is big enough to go through here. It takes forever, because I'll have to use some pilot bits. So you go smaller bit, or bigger bit, bigger bit, bigger bit, because this is such a big hole. And I don't have a cobalt drill bit that big, so I have to use a standard not titanium, whatever it is. The drill bits that they make it sound like they're really good, but they actually suck at drilling through metal. But yeah, so like I said, we're gonna drill through here, move our bolt back to this hole, and then that way we'll be able to, have it not slide forward when we lower the motor down. But the good thing is we won't even have to lower the motor down that far, because I don't have a plate that I want to use. Because basically when you're assembling rotary engines, like, you have to assemble them like a pancake stack, like So what a lot of people who, actually have done this before do is they make their own plate that bolts into the side of the irons, so that way when you're doing stuff, like, you can just stack it up on the engine stand. But essentially I'm going to be assembling this on the workbench, which means we're just going to dump it on the workbench. So it's literally going to go, like, up to here, like, the motor's going to be up to here, it's going to go over there, and it's going to go boop down onto the table. So, like I said, not super worried, but don't emulate this, because there's lots of things that we're doing that are just due to lack of pre-planning and lack of proper tools. Because if we had the proper tools, like, for instance, I should have one of these with an arm that's like a foot longer. They are a thing. They're just more expensive than the Harbor Freight. I think Harbor Freight even makes one that's like 5 or 6 inches longer. It was just the more expensive engine hoist, and I think it's rated for like 2 tons. And so I was like, I don't need 2 tons. I don't need to be able to lift a car with my crane, which honestly sounds kind of sketchy. Would you want to lift an entire car with one of these?
No.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to either. But those are potentially useful for, like, I mean, literally, I think those are for when you want to pull an engine from, like, a Oh, sorry, goddamn, like 3,500. Like you want to pull a Cummins that weighs like 350 pounds out, or I don't know. I'm sure there's tons of use cases for something like that. Anyway, I'm gonna quit blabbering. We're gonna go ahead and pull this thing. So yeah, we'll see you in a minute. Alright, so try to, because we almost had the motor out, and then I completely forgot about the fact that this car has 2 oil coolers that are hooked up to the car still. So that being said, there is this line right here, which you can see if that chain was out of the way. Yeah, that line right there, which is actually normally under this, but we've pried it out and we actually ended up zip tying it in place. So you can see that zip tie hanging out in there, just so that it was easy to fit stuff into. And unfortunately, my local hardware store only had this guy, which is a 1/16 wrench, which is what fits around this inner collar right here. God, that chain is somehow perfectly in the way of everything. Fits on the inner collar, whereas this outer collar is like a 33 millimeter, or I'm not honestly sure. I'll have to check the manual and see if these are metric or if they're imperial, because the 1/16 did work pretty well. So I had to get an adjustable wrench, which I hate using those for stuff like this, because it's really hard to make sure that they don't, you know, just slide off or do something weird. But that being said, this did work to crack these loose, so you got to give them a good amount of oomph. So having longer wrenches helped out a bit. But yeah, so anywho, we're finally got that line undone. I'm going to go ahead and fight with it some more to get it nice and loose so I can actually just unscrew it by hand. And after that, hopefully, if I didn't forget anything else, we'll be able to actually pull this motor today. Okay, so obviously things took, oh, I'm sorry, time lapse camera. Things took even longer than they were supposed to, because we had, I had to, basically me and the AC compressor did not see eye to eye. So luckily that with this car's future, we don't really care about AC. So yeah, I just sawzalled the hoses off there and there respectively. And then the AC compressor dropped on the ground somewhere below and no longer got in the frickin' way. Only for me to then figure out that there is another line. I actually had to undo the main oil line that goes right here into the block. Forgot about that line, so that little guy is just a banjo bolt style. Like it's kind of like a fuel line on the S2000, but basically the banjo bolt goes through here and oil gets forced through there. Yippity doo dah, yippity yay. So, anywho, like I said, obviously, engine is out of the car. So now what we're gonna go ahead and do is we're gonna move it over to my workbench, which is now covered in bull crap. So we are gonna clear off the BS, move the engine, plop it on my tabletop, and then we're going to call it a frickin' day, because this was all we really set out to do with this. So now, basically, the next thing I lied. I'm big effing liar. Oh, my little light died again. Dude, I have no idea what's up with this thing. It's like, some days it works perfectly, and other days it's like... So, anyway, that being said, that's going to suck for recording outside, because now the little light isn't working. It's kind of a bummer. But, anyway, like I said, what we're going to do now is get the motor set down, make sure that we have everything else squared away on the car and that there's nothing dangling off of it. And, let's see, I don't even know, what time is it? Alexa, what time is it?
The time is 8:35 p.m.
Hey, you're only a little faster. The technology, man, it's coming after us. Anywho, so we're gonna go ahead and we'll probably go ahead and just load this bad boy up, and then take him back to his next little resting place, and then he'll sit there for a little while we work on getting this little guy turned into a functioning motor again. So I really look forward to putting everything back together, because I was not nearly as meticulous as I usually am with documenting everything, but we have instructions, and I was kind of lazier because we have a reference car. So if we're really confused about where anything goes, we can look at the white RX-8. So that's the nice thing. It's kind of cheating. But for any of you guys who are doing this on your only car and have no reference point, I would highly recommend going slower and marking everything. Marking everything appropriately, keeping track of where everything goes, and keeping track of all of your bolts. We already have bolts, so we don't know where they go. So, yeah, womp womp. So, alright, I'm going to stop talking, and we're going to go ahead and load this thing up and do other things, and yada 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 yada. Alright, so, engine is officially on the table with pretty much no drama up to that point. I can say that now because the engine's on the table. Either that or my workbench will collapse and mock me for my shoddy workmanship. I'd like to think my workbench is okay. Anywho, now we're just going to go ahead, we're going to put the wheels back on the car, we're going to drop it back down on the ground, and yeah, then this little guy's going to go home, and after that we're going to work on... we're going to work on a few other project-y things in the coming weeks. But first things first is just going to be that over the rest of this week, I'm going to be digging into... I wish this wasn't in the way. I'm sorry, engine stand. You're like my redheaded stepchild of a tool. Of course I knocked something over. Anyway, yeah, so we're going to be working on that little guy and tearing it apart to confirm what went wrong, as well as, hopefully fix it and put it back together better. And then after that, we'll hopefully be able to put this thing back together and make it start without spending too much money to get it put back together. And then, hopefully after that, we'll be driving it.